Delwyn here. I'm putting together this video based on a few comments and requests I've had on the BIBO2 Touch SKR 1.4 turbo upgrade that I did recently. You can see the video link down below. A lot of folks have had questions about the firmware that I was running on the TFT. So I need to clarify a couple of things and then walk you through how to actually load the Bigtreetech firmware onto this display. So firstly, the Bigtreetech firmware and the firmware changes are not needed to upgrade to the SKR 1.4 or 1.4 turbo boards. This is really a nice to have. The stock standard macro-based TFT firmware that the BIBO comes with works absolutely fine. You do need to make changes to the ribbon cable for that upgrade specifically, which I'll cover off in a separate video. But for this, I'll be focusing on the display itself. Really simple. So really nice changes here. The reason I moved to this interface was because I found that the macro-base software was not as flexible as I would have liked. I couldn't send G-codes to the machine. I didn't get visibility on what was happening on the actual serial wire itself. If the machine was echoing back any errors, I wasn't able to debug it really effectively. Right, so this is the Bigtreetech firmware running. Your home page shows you the states of your extruders, bed temperature, fan speed, and so on. Everything you would expect. Info shows you the commands that are being echoed back from the machine, which is kind of nice. Any errors or M117 display commands will be reflected there. So from print, as you'd expect, the onboard TFT card does actually work. If I put that back in, it should give me something. There we go. The card works well. Onboard SD, that's the SD card of the motherboard itself, and then USB disk is there. I've got no USB inserted right now. So from the main menu, let's go into the extruder settings. Here you can preheat. This is pre-configured in the firmware for the different materials that you're using. Then the heat menu, fairly standard for extruder 1 or the bed, or extruder 0. You can also adjust the step size in degrees, which is quite nice if you want to get up to your max temperature really quickly via the display. Obviously your fan is there, full. That works pretty well. And then cool down, to cool down the machine. From there, your bed, it's really the same interface as the that we've just been through. They seem to link back on each other quite often in this. And then this is your extrusion menu. So this is where things get interesting. Moving as you would expect, in step sizes of 10 millimeter, 0.1 millimeter, and 1 millimeter. Yeah, you can move your X, Y, and Z axes independently. Homing, you can move home specific axes or do a full home. This is what I was referring to in the earlier comment where I said it echoes back what you're seeing on the wire from the Marlin firmware, which I really like and makes debugging a lot easier. So I have auto leveling enabled because I'm using the BL Touch. So yeah, I can initiate the auto leveling functionality, or I can actually test my BL Touch unit by deploying, stowing, initiating a test command there. What is great is that during printing, it's actually going to continue doing the testing for a while. Thanks. During the printing, you can adjust the actual distance from the bed in 0.1 millimeter steps, just in case your leveling is not quite there. That's your Z nozzle offset. Right. Extrusion, here's your load and unloading functionality. And then settings, this is where you can configure the display settings, the beeping, language, rotation isn't really used in this device. Your machine settings, This is where you can store custom parameters or Marlin commands on the display. Really nice if you find yourself repeating specific commands during your setup. Often I need to plug my laptop in and then run through commands that I find very repetitive and frustrating. For example, each time I upgrade the firmware, I want to restore the EEPROM to the default values. If you see on the serial port, it actually says EEPROM error and loads the default. That's because you're running a different version of your EEPROM config to what is expected. Restore EEPROM will rectify that for you, instead of sending the M502, M503 or M500 commands sequentially. LED color, I haven't really implemented the LEDs on this board, but I've got it there for future use. The G-code menu is particularly useful if you're busy testing a new setup or a configuration change or an upgrade. For example, when I was busy with the BL touches, I needed to test the leveling a number of times. You know, this menu is really useful where you can actually send your commands instead of having to go whip out your laptop and plug it in. So you can issue the Marlin firmware command and then see the response in real time, which is fantastic. Right, shut down the printer and then parameter. This graphic area is a bit of a bug I need to resolve, but parameters currently are showing me my TMC driver current configuration and steps per unit. This is a new feature on the Bigtreetech branch that I've noticed. I'm not quite sure what the intent is here. It looks like I can configure the current of my motors. I'm not sure why anyone would want to do that in real time, but I'll probably end up needing to do it in the future when I discover why. So that's a quick walkthrough on the Bigtreetech firmware. I hope that was informative. From here, I'll go into the actual firmware update if you're running the standard MakerBase or MKS firmware that comes preloaded with your BIBO printer. So what you'll want to do is head over to your favorite browser and type in the URL or copy and paste the URL from this video and head over to my build of Bigtreetech's touchscreen firmware. From here, you can clone or download the repo. The download should be easy whether you're logged in or not, and unpack this once it's complete. Right, so as you can see, this is finished downloading. This is the unpacked files. There are 3 directories confusingly saying copy to SD card. So the lower 2 here are part of the original Bigtreetech's firmware build. This is for the Bigtreetech LCD displays, and we're not interested in it. We are interested in the SD card, copy to SD card MKS. This build is specifically for the MKS build. In here, you will note a folder and a file. The MKS TFT28.bin file is identically named to that of the update files that MKS provides you with. This is because the bootloader looks for this file name on boot. If it's found, it'll initiate the upgrade process. So you want to copy both these folders to the TFT card, to the SD card. This is just the font and the bitmaps that are referenced by the firmware. Now, I have the original SD card that came with the BIBO plugged in. To be safe, I'm going to right click and format this. FAT32 is the supported file system, so let's do that. Relatively quick. Copy these 2 files. Now once again from the MKS build folder, let's copy that and pop it into our SSD card. Now once that is done copying, you want to safely eject this card and head over to our BIBO display. There we go. Right, so let's head on over to the BIBO and start the upgrade. Okay, so we're here at the BIBO. The print is currently in idle and it is running the standard BIBO MKS firmware for this unit. Yours might look slightly different depending on the style that you've uploaded, but nothing out of the ordinary over here. This is version 3.0.3, and what we want to do now is flash it with the firmware we've downloaded from GitHub and test it to make sure everything's operating. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the SD card that we've used to upload the firmware, pop it into the slot, and just because I'm too lazy to reach around, I'm actually just going to pull the power out. Right, give it a sec, and let's power it back up. So the bootloader picked up the file name on our SD card and is uploading this to the microcontroller itself. After this, we want to see if the new software starts up and starts copying the images onto the board. Let's give it a minute. Great, so this is no longer the BIBO firmware. This is the Bigtreetech boot code, which you're seeing over here. It's currently copying the font, so this shouldn't take too long. If you've not gotten to this point, that means that something has gone wrong. And what you want to do is try and restore the original MKS firmware and try again. So it's going through each of the bitmaps, copying it to memory location. This generally takes quite a while, so we'll skip to the end. And there you have it. So because this is a first time load, it is asking me to calibrate the screen. I generally prefer to use a pen for this, but let me just try my finger. Yeah, as I thought, I'm not being very accurate, and it's detecting some concerns. What is it saying? Oh, automatic bed leveling. Ignore that. Right, so there we have it. We are in the new Bigtreetech firmware. Let's give it a test and run through some of the functions. So there is this annoying beep, which I prefer to turn off. So I believe I go to screen settings for that, put it on silent, and let's do a quick homing test. There we go. And there you have it. That should be it. And yeah, let me know if you have any problems getting to this point. Going back is as easy as putting the original BIBO firmware back onto the SD card, booting it again, and restoring the original factory firmware to this screen.